Okay, let's dive in. Have you ever faced a project that felt less like navigating with a map and more like being dropped blindfolded into a maze?
Oh, definitely.
Especially in something as intricate as media localization, say, dubbing a whole season of a show into multiple languages, trying to figure out exactly what it's going to cost, how the entire complex workflow actually functions step by step, and predicting precisely when it will be finished. It can feel like pure guesswork, right?
That feeling is incredibly pervasive in this industry, yeah. Media localization, particularly dubbing, it involves such a dense network of um, creative, technical, logistical challenges. And that's across diverse markets, too.
Hmm.
Each language, each piece of content, each talent pool introduces variables that interact in ways that, well, they can make true predictability seem almost impossible without the right tools.
Absolutely. And that difficulty, that feeling of the dubbing labyrinth, that's exactly what brought us to this deep dive today. We recently had a really fascinating chat with Dr. Paulo Fontana. Paulo is a real veteran in the media localization space. I mean, he's worked at major players like Technicolor, SDI Media, iUno.
Yeah, he knows the landscape inside out.
Exactly. And in our conversation, he shared some incredibly insightful perspectives on a persistent challenge he's observed throughout his career, this fundamental need for a truly robust, transparent, and crucially predictable way to master the costs and timelines of dubbing projects.
He spoke about this not just as like a theoretical problem, but as something that came up constantly in his previous roles. Teams, especially in sales and operations, they were constantly asking for better ways, better tools, anything really, to bring structure and reliability to the process, estimating costs, setting delivery timelines for dubbing, subtitling.
So that's a real pain point.
It highlights that this isn't just some minor inconvenience. It's a critical bottleneck for many businesses in this space.
So building on that deep firsthand experience, seeing this exact challenge again and again, Paolo has developed a vision. It's for a powerful new tool designed specifically to cut through all that complexity. He's been developing an idea codenamed DUCATO.
DUCATO?
Yeah, it stands for Dubbing Cost Analytics, Tracking, and Oversight. He described it to me as his vision for an A to Z interactive tool that uses smart, granular parameters to transform that uncertainty into clarity.
Okay, so it's aiming to be comprehensive,
Yeah,
A to Z.
that's the idea.
And it represents a significant shift in philosophy, doesn't it? Moving away from reliance on just, broad historical averages or maybe expert intuition alone
Right.
towards a systematic, data-driven approach.
Yeah.
One that builds the estimate from the ground up based on the unique characteristics of each specific project.
And what we're doing today is taking a deep dive into the ideas Paolo shared with me about this DUCATO concept.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the core problem it's designed to solve, this dubbing labyrinth we mentioned. Look at the significant, potentially game-changing benefits it could bring to key roles within media localization companies. And then, I think this is where it gets really interesting, we're going to peel back the layers and look under the hood to see how DUCATO is designed to work with, well, incredible precision.
So our mission in this deep dive is really to give you, the listener, a clear, actionable understanding of this innovative approach. It's about replacing that flying blind feeling with a structured, predictable, and controllable process for managing these complex dubbing projects, mastering their costs and timelines.
Let's really unpack this dubbing labyrinth feeling then, this idea of flying blind that Paolo talked about. Why is it so difficult, even for experienced teams, to accurately pinpoint costs, map workflows, predict timelines for dubbing? What makes it such a complex beast?
Well, the complexity, it really stems from the sheer number of variables and how they all interact. They're interdependent. Think about it. You have different languages, right? Each with unique linguistic structures, different requirements. You've got varying content types, genres, dialogue densities. Like a fast-paced documentary with loads of voiceovers is totally different from a slow-burning drama with minimal dialogue.
Sure, the workload is different.
Totally. Then you have different talent needs. The number of actors. Are they adults or children? Do they need specific voice qualities? You've got technical requirements, different mixing standards, different QA levels. And critically, you have diverse regional practices. How is talent actually paid?
Ah, right.
Is it per hour in one region, maybe per take or loop in another? Or perhaps it's based on the finished minute of content.
That regional variation in how the unit of work itself is measured, that sounds like a huge source of inconsistency right there. If you're tracking things differently across different markets, how can you ever consolidate that into a consistent model?
Precisely. That's a huge part of the problem. It creates a situation where comparing projects or standardizing processes becomes incredibly difficult. If your fundamental unit of measurement changes from one country to the next, just aggregating data for forecasting or analysis is a massive headache.
Yeah, I can see that.
And without a systematic way to account for all of these fluctuating factors, the language, content type, actor count, script density, the regional unit of measure for every single step in that multi-stage dubbing workflow, well, trying to estimate feels less like a calculation and more like an educated guess. And it might be built on potentially shaky foundations.
It sounds like trying to build a really precise structure, but the ground underneath keeps shifting.
Exactly. And this challenge, it isn't new or just theoretical. Paolo's extensive experience, developing various tools and calculators for subtitling and dubbing teams at Technicolor, SDI Media, iUno, it really underlines this. He's seen the problem from multiple angles and heard the consistent pleas from teams who just needed a more dependable way to generate quotes and predict delivery dates for clients. So this vision for DUCATO, it isn't some abstract concept. It's really the culmination of years spent grappling with this very real daily operational challenge.
So DUCATO is really being conceived as the comprehensive answer. An answer to a problem Paolo has personally seen and, tried to solve iteratively throughout his career. It's aiming to move beyond just partial fixes to build something truly foundational.
That's the essence of it, yeah. DUCATO was envisioned as this ambitious plan to build what could genuinely be a game-changing cost and timeline calculator. It's designed to be far more than like a simple one-off spreadsheet. The ambition is to create a central command, a kind of mission control for managing all the quantitative aspects of dubbing projects.
I love that metaphor, mission control. It implies having complete visibility, right? All the critical data points and controls right there in front of you, allowing for crystal clear visibility and absolute control, as the vision describes it.
That's absolutely the goal. Now, while it's currently in the planning and development phase, the potential is truly transformative, taking that inherent uncertainty and that feeling of flying blind and replacing it with a predictable, transparent, and manageable process.
Okay, so we understand the significant problem it addresses. Now, let's talk about the impact. Who stands to gain the most from this kind of clarity and control, and how specifically? Paolo's vision for DUCATO is clearly targeted at 3 key roles within a media localization business: the sales growth drivers, the operations architects, and the FP&A strategists. Let's break down the promised transformation for each one.
Absolutely. These are the roles right on the front lines, aren't they? Project acquisition, execution, financial oversight. The current challenges hit them directly, so a tool like DUCATO is really designed with their specific pain points and needs in mind.
All right, let's start with sales growth drivers then. Their job is to bring in business, quote, projects quickly and competitively and ultimately win deals. How does DUCATO change their day-to-day world and, their success rate?
For sales teams, the promise is a fundamental shift. A shift to supreme confidence in client interactions. I mean, imagine being in a meeting and being able to generate a precise, detailed quote for a complex multi-language dubbing project almost instantly, right there on the spot.
Wow.
Instead of saying, let me get back to you after Ops and Finance run the numbers,
Okay.
which, as you know, can take days sometimes.
Rapid, reliable quoting. That alone sounds huge. Just accelerating sales cycles, removing that potential bottleneck right in the initial client conversation. No waiting, no guesswork built in.
Exactly. Speed and accuracy are power in sales. But it's more than just the final number, the price. DUCATO is designed to allow them to effortlessly walk a client through the clear, logical workflow their project will actually follow.
Okay.
From the initial script adaptation and casting, all the way through recording, editing, mixing, final QA, the whole 9 yards.
Being able to visualize that sorted, step-by-step task list for a client up front, that must build incredible trust. And it sets clear expectations right from the beginning. It shows you really have a handle on the complexity.
It absolutely does. And hand in hand with cost and workflow is the timeline. DUCATO aims to provide highly accurate delivery timelines by calculating the total working times required for every single task in the project.
Confident completion dates. That must eliminate so much stress both internally and for the client, avoiding those last-minute timeline surprises that can really damage relationships.
Precisely. And when you combine all of it, the rapid, precise quotes, the transparent workflow breakdown, the reliable timeline, sales teams can elevate their conversations. They move beyond just competing purely on price.
Right.
They can instead showcase a professional, highly efficient, and transparent process. Paolo believes this enables more strategic deal-making and ultimately a higher win rate because the client sees they're working with a partner who truly understands and can predictably manage the complexity involved.
That makes perfect sense. The quote itself becomes a demonstration of operational excellence, not just a number on a page. Okay, shifting gears then to operations architects. These are the people responsible for taking that sold project and actually making it happen on time, on budget. How does DUCATO help them move away from the headaches of, say, manual planning?
For operations, DUCATO is envisioned as the ultimate planning tool. It's about enabling precision planning and hopefully perfect execution. One of the key benefits is dynamic workflow selection. Based on the specific parameters of the project, you input the language, the content type, the services needed. DUCATO will intelligently build a tailored step-by-step workflow designed specifically for that job.
So it's essentially generating the core project plan automatically, making sure no critical steps are missed, like,
Yeah.
casting before recording or QC before final delivery, and ensuring they're in the correct logical sequence.
That's the core idea, yes. It aims to provide that structured blueprint without all the manual effort and, frankly, the risk of error. And central to that blueprint is highly precise time estimation. DUCATO is designed to tell you exactly how many working hours are required for each individual phase of the project and for the entire project overall.
Okay, this is the kind of granular detail ops teams desperately need. Knowing those precise hour estimates, that allows for much smarter resource allocation, right? Assigning the right editors or mixers for the right amount of time.
Exactly.
It enables optimal scheduling of studio time and talent. And critically, it allows for proactive capacity planning, seeing potential bottlenecks maybe months in advance based on the pipeline DUCATO is projecting.
Exactly. And it also provides critical insight into cost drivers.
Yeah.
DUCATO is designed to quickly pinpoint which specific elements or tasks are contributing most significantly to the overall project cost.
So if a project quote seems high, ops can instantly see, okay, it's because this specific language requires a high number of takes per minute, or maybe the word count is significantly higher than average for this runtime. That insight allows them to explore ways to streamline processes, maybe negotiate better rates with specific vendors if needed,
Right.
and ultimately maximize profitability by truly understanding the cost structure.
It's about moving beyond just managing costs to actively optimizing them. And all of this detailed automated planning leads to a much smoother project kickoff. Everyone involved starts with a clear, shared, data-backed roadmap for all tasks and timelines. That significantly reduces friction, avoids miscommunications, and boosts team efficiency right from day one.
That sounds like it brings much-needed order and clarity to the often chaotic start of a large, complex project. Okay, finally, let's talk about FP&A strategists, the finance professionals, the ones who need to budget, forecast, analyze profitability. How does DUCATO empower them?
For finance teams, DUCATO aims to provide an unprecedented level of accuracy and granular data for strategic decision-making. First and foremost, it enables far more accurate budgeting. You can build reliable project budgets based directly on the precise quotes and estimates that DUCATO generates.
Improving financial predictability across the entire business, that's a huge win in itself.
It's foundational, really, and it makes contribution margin analysis significantly easier and more reliable. You can readily compare actual project costs and revenues against DUCATO's initial budgeted numbers. This allows finance to quickly identify which types of projects, or maybe which languages or services, are proving to be high-margin successes and which might be lower-margin challenges. This analysis directly informs future strategic decisions, where to focus sales efforts, which markets are most profitable, where operational efficiencies might be needed most.
That level of detailed insight is absolutely critical for sound financial strategy, isn't it? You're not just looking at aggregate numbers anymore. You're seeing profitability right down at the project level.
Precisely. And this detailed data feeds directly into enhanced financial forecasting. By leveraging the comprehensive task-level data DUCATO generates across the entire pipeline potential and confirmed projects, finance teams can create much more accurate overall revenue and cost projections for the business.
So better overall financial health indicators and just less uncertainty in forecasting. Makes sense.
Exactly. It also enables more strategic resource allocation by letting finance understand the true cost drivers at a remarkably granular level. This means financial resources can be allocated more effectively to support profitable activities and initiatives. Ultimately, DUCATO is designed to equip FP&A teams with robust, granular data for both routine financial reporting and high-level strategic planning, moving them away from relying on estimates or broad averages and towards concrete data-backed decisions that drive profitability and growth.
So if we look at the overall impact across these roles then, DUCATO is really envisioned to replace that feeling of working with a black box, where you put in some high-level details and a final number magically appears, but you don't truly understand the why behind it.
Right, the magic black box.
And replace it with a fully transparent, predictable, and highly optimized process.
That's the core transformation it's aiming for. Transparency breeds predictability, and predictability allows for optimization across sales, operations, and finance.
Leading to higher win rates, smoother project delivery, better resource utilization, and ultimately healthier margins and more informed strategic growth. It really does seem designed to touch and improve every key function involved in bringing a dubbing project to life.
It aims to become the single source of truth for cost and time data, ensuring alignment and efficiency across the entire organization. That's the big picture goal.
Okay, we've covered the problem, the complexity of the dubbing labyrinth, and the vision for DUCATO as the solution, detailing the significant benefits it could bring to sales, operations, and finance. Now, let's get to the part that really excites me. Pulling back the curtain and looking under DUCATO's hood, how is this precision actually engineered? How does it arrive at these precise cost and time estimates?
Well, Paolo described it not just as a simple calculator, but more like a meticulously engineered system. And while you can kind of understand it using the analogy of interconnected components, maybe think less simple spreadsheet and more a multi-layered model where different parts interact logically.
Okay.
The real power comes from seeing how the internal data, the specific project details you feed in, and the smart rules all combine to produce those precise outputs. You don't need to be an engineer to use it, obviously, but understand the framework, the logic, is definitely key to appreciating its potential.
So what are the main components or layers in this engine room then? Where does the whole process begin?
It all starts with what you could call the control panel, or maybe the input sheet. This is basically the user interface where someone could be a salesperson generating a quote, could be a project manager initiating a job, feeds in the core details of the specific dubbing project. These inputs are the raw ingredients DUCATO uses to start building the estimate.
What are the essential inputs needed here? What absolutely has to go in?
The fundamental parameters that really define the scale and nature of the project. These typically include things like, first, total runtime minutes. This is the primary scale of the content, right? For example, let's say we input 60 minutes for a standard TV episode.
Okay, 60 minutes.
Then, number of adult actors. How many adult voices are required? Let's say our project needs 8 adult actors.
8 adults.
And the number of child actors. These often have different rates, different scheduling complexities. Let's say we need 2 child actors for this one.
2 kids. Got it.
Number of words. This is the total word count of the original script. Paolo really stressed this is a critical input, especially for tasks like translation and adaptation, and it can be surprisingly high even for content with shorter runtimes. Let's imagine the script has 8,400 words.
8,400 words for a 60-minute show. Okay.
Yeah, it can add up fast. And finally, batch number project grouping. This is important because doing one standalone 60-minute project is operationally different from doing one episode as part of, say, a 10-episode series. DUCATO needs to know if volume efficiencies should apply. So let's say this is part of a 10-episode series.
Okay, so you feed in the basic factual dimensions of the project, runtime, actors, words, volume. Where does DUCATO look next? What does it do with that info?
DUCATO then refers to its master library, which essentially houses the lookup tables. Think of these as the standardized rulebooks. They contain all the baseline data, the standard rates, the standard time estimates for every conceivable task within the dubbing workflow, for every relevant language and region.
So this is where it knows how much things should cost and how long they should take under normal circumstances.
Right.
The baseline.
Exactly. But with a really critical layer of sophistication. A key differentiator Paolo mentioned is its ability to use a localized unit of measure, or UON, tailored to the specific language and region. This is fundamental to its accuracy. It doesn't just apply some global rate. It understands that, say, in Germany, you might bill voice talent by the take, while in Brazil, it might be by the hour, and maybe in Mexico, it's by the finished minute. DUCATO knows the standard UOM for a task in a given region and uses that for its calculations.
Ah, okay, that's the insight Paolo applied, recognizing that fundamental difference in how work is actually measured and paid for globally, and building a system that can handle those local standards intelligently.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we looked at an example table that illustrates this structure. It has columns like task name, the unit of measure, UMM, the language region, the base unit cost for that the base working time hours per unit of something called effective units per runtime minute, which is a conversion factor, and then a derived working time hours per one-time minute of content, which is a normalized value. There are also often notes providing context, like typical minutes per take or takes per minute.
Let's really zoom in on an example from that table to make this concrete. How about we take the line item for recording and talent adult, specifically in German EU? Walk us through that row.
Okay, great choice. Let's break down the data DUCATO would find in the lookup table for this specific task in this specific region. First, task name, recording and talent adult. This represents the combined service, right? Studio time and the performance of adult voice actors.
Okay.
Unit of measure, it says take. This tells DUCATO that in the German EU market, this service is typically billed and measured by the individual take or loop of dialogue recorded.
Right, the take is the unit.
Language region, obviously German, EU. So this row applies to German dubbing projects handled in the EU. Base unit cost, the table shows 15. This figure represents the standard direct cost associated with one single take. As Paolo explained it, this is designed to encompass both the cost of the actor's performance for that take and the proportional cost of using the recording studio for the time it takes to complete that take. So $15 per take.
Okay, so DUCATO now knows that in German EU, one adult take costs $15. What about the time side of things? How long does it take?
Right, that's where the next columns come in. Base working time hours per unit of The table shows 0.05. This is a critical internal metric. It tells DUCATO that on average takes 0.05 hours, which is 3 minutes, 0.05 times 60 minutes per hour of combined studio and actor working time to successfully complete one take.
3 minutes per take, okay.
Then there's effective units per runtime minute. The table says 5. This is a really key conversion factor Paolo built into the model. It represents the average number of takes required to produce just 1 minute of finished, high-quality dubbed content in German. So on average, 5 takes are needed for every minute of content.
5 takes to get 1 minute done. That feels about right for dubbing complexity.
Yeah, it reflects the re-records, adjustments, etc. And finally, derived working time hours per one runtime minute of content. This shows 0.25. DUCATO calculates this automatically. It's the total normalized working time consumed to produce 1 minute of final dubbed content. It's derived by multiplying the effective units per runtime minute, which was 5 takes min, by the base working time per unit of which was 0.05 hours take. So 5 times 0.05 equals 0.25 hours.
Okay, so 0.25 hours of working time. That's 15 minutes, a quarter of an hour, needed to produce 1 minute of finished German adult dubbed content. That number represents the density of the work, kind of normalized back to the runtime minute.
Exactly. It provides a useful high-level metric, but the real power comes from its foundation in the granular unit, the take, and its associated time and cost. The notes you might see, like minutes per take 3 and takes per minute 5 in the table, they simply reiterate these conversion factors for clarity.
Okay, crystal clear on the lookup tables. So we've got the project inputs like runtime, actors, words from the control panel, and we've got the standardized rates, times, and conversion factors per task region from the master library lookup tables. Where does DUCATO combine all this information and actually crunch the numbers?
Right, that happens in what Paolo called the calculation engine, sometimes referred to as the intermediate calculation sheets. This is where the system performs the step-by-step calculations for each individual task in the workflow based on the inputs and the lookup data it just found. For every single task, there are typically 3 main steps involved.
Okay, lay them out for us. What's step 1?
Step 1 is determining the total units needed for that specific task based on whatever its primary driver is. So for tasks where the workload is driven purely by the content length, like mixing or maybe final QA, the total units needed is simply the total runtime minutes from the input sheet. If our project is 60 minutes, DUCATO determines we need 60 units for mixing and 60 units for QA, where the unit is 1 minute of content.
Simple enough, length drives length-based tasks.
Exactly. Now, for tasks driven by script volume, like translation or script adaptation, the total units needed is the number of words from the input sheet. If we input 8,400 words, DUCATO calculates we need 8,400 units for translation and 8,400 units for adaptation, where the unit is 1 word.
Okay, that makes logical sense too. The workload for those tasks scales directly with the length or the word count. But what if you don't have the word count handy? Say you're trying to generate a quote really quickly for sales. Is the tool just stuck then?
Ah, that's a crucial detail that Paolo specifically highlighted. DUCATO was designed to handle that scenario. If the number of words isn't provided in the input sheet, DUCATO can actually estimate it. It uses the total runtime minutes and the effective units per runtime minute for that specific task, pulled from the lookup tables.
Okay, how does that work?
For example, let's look at German translation again in the lookup table. Let's say the effective units per runtime minute is listed as 140 words per minute on average for German content. So if our 60-minute project didn't have an input word count, DUCATO would estimate the total units needed for German translation as 60 minutes times 140 words minute, which equals 8,400 words.
That's really smart. So it uses the typical industry ratio from the lookup tables as a default if the specific number isn't there. It allows sales to generate a quote even with slightly less complete initial information by intelligently filling in the blanks based on typical content density for that language.
It's exactly. It maintains usability while still grounding the estimate in data. Now the third category, for tasks, driven by a combination of actor count and runtime, things like recording and talent, voice direction, maybe casting, the calculation for total units needed is a bit more involved. It uses the number of adult actors and child actors from the input panel combined with the total runtime minutes and the specific effective units per runtime minute for that task's localized which it gets from the lookup tables.
Let's go back to our German adult recording example again to walk through this specifically. We had 60 total runtime minutes as input. And the lookup table for German adult recording told us the effective units per runtime minute was 5 takes per minute.
Right. So DUCATO calculates the total units needed for just the German adult recording task on this 60-minute project. It takes the runtime and multiplies it by that conversion factor. 60 minutes, 5 takes minute equals 300 takes. This is the total number of takes DUCATO estimates are needed for all the adult actors combined across the entire 60 minutes of content, specifically in German. And then, of course, we would do a similar calculation for the two child actors using their specific lookup table entry if it exists, assuming they have maybe different takes per minute or different costs, and then sum up the total takes needed across all the talent groups.
Okay, so focusing just on the adults for now. For the adult recording part of this 60-minute German project, DUCATO estimates we need a total of 300 takes. That's step 1 for that specific task completed. What's step 2 in the calculation engine?
Step 2 is calculating the cost per task. And the formula is pretty straightforward once you have the total units needed. Cost for task equals total units needed for that task, multiplied by the relevant base unit cost from the lookup tables. This is also where that batch number input might come into play if it's part of a larger series, like our 10-episode example. DUCATO can be configured to apply predefined volume-based discounts to that base unit cost.
Let's use our German adult recording example again. We determined the total units needed was 300 takes, and the base unit cost for German adult recording from the lookup table was $15 per take.
Correct. So DUCATO calculates the cost for German adult recording as 300 takes multiplied by $15 per take, which equals $4,500. That's the estimated direct cost just for the adult recording portion of this specific project.
$4,500 just for the adult recording part of the specific 60-minute German project. That number feels incredibly specific and, frankly, really useful for budgeting and quoting accurately.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on a second, though, just to make sure I'm completely following the flow here, because we've gone from runtime to takes per minute, to total takes, then to cost per take, and now total cost for the task. Could you just trace that path one more time for the German adult recording example? Start from the initial input and walk me through exactly how it arrives at that $4,500 figure again.
Absolutely. Happy to. Let's break it down step by step again, nice and slow, just for clarity. 1, start with the input. The project is 60 minutes long. That's the total runtime minutes.
Right, 60 minutes.
2, go to the lookup table. For the specific task, German adult recording, DUCATO finds the key conversion factor. 5 takes per runtime minute. That's the effective units per runtime minute.
Right, 5 takes per minute.
3, calculate total units needed. DUCATO calculates the total number of takes required for the entire 60 minutes. 60 minutes multiplied by 5 takes minute equals 300 takes.
300 takes total. Got it.
4, find the unit cost. In the very same lookup table entry, DUCATO finds the cost per take. $15 per take, that's the base unit cost.
$15 a take? Yep.
5, calculate task cost. Finally, DUCATO multiplies the total number of takes needed by the cost per take. 300 takes times $15 per take equals $4,500.
Okay.
So yes, it flows precisely from the runtime through the conversion factor in the lookup table to get total units needed, and then multiplies by the unit cost from the same lookup table entry.
Okay, I've definitely got that flow now. It's building the cost piece by piece based on how the work is actually measured and costed at that really granular level. Runtime leads to the conversion factor, effective units, gives you total units needed, multiplied by cost per unit, base unit cost. Gives you total cost for that specific task. Crystal clear. So what's step 3 then in the calculation engine?
Step 3 is calculating the time per task. And the logic here is exactly parallel to the cost calculation. Time for task equals total units needed for that task multiplied by the relevant base working time, hours, per unit of home, again, pulled from the lookup tables. And just like cost, the batch number might influence this too, as volume can sometimes impact overall turnaround time or scheduling efficiency, which ultimately translates to working hours saved or spent.
Let's apply that to our German adult recording example one last time. We know the total units needed is 300 takes, and the base working time from the lookup table for German adult recording was 0.05 hours per take.
Correct. So DUCATO calculates the time for German adult recording as 300 takes multiplied by 0.05 hours per take, which equals 15 hours. This is the estimated total working time required just for the adult recording sessions for this 60-minute German project.
Wow, 15 hours of actual studio and actor time just for the adult recording part. That level of detail is invaluable. That's exactly the kind of information an operations manager needs to schedule the right amount of studio time and book the actors for specific slots, probably spread over several days.
Precisely. It moves scheduling from a rough estimate, maybe based on past projects, to a data-backed requirement specific to this project. And importantly, DUCATO performs these 3 steps: calculate total units needed, calculate cost per task, calculate time per task for every single task defined in the dubbing workflow for that project. So translation, adaptation, casting, voice directing, editing, mixing, QA, delivery, and so on. It does it for all of them.
So after the calculation engine has done all these detailed task-specific calculations based on the initial inputs in those lookup tables, where does it all get summarized? Where do you see the final picture?
Right, that's the role of the final summary or the final calculation sheet. This basically acts as the dashboard or the consolidated output. DUCATO takes the calculated cost per task from every single one of those intermediate calculations for every single task involved and simply sums them all up to provide the overall total project cost.
And that's the core number that goes into the client quote, presumably.
Yes, the direct cost base. And similarly, it takes the calculated time per task from every single intermediate calculation and sums those all up to give you the overall total project working time. This is the critical number for predicting the total duration of the project timeline and planning resources.
And you mentioned there are optional steps after these core calculations, things you can add on.
Right. Once the core total project costs and total project working time are determined based on all those direct costs and times derived from lookup tables, the system allows for optional additions. This is where you might apply things like internal overheads, or add a contingency buffer for unexpected issues, or apply the desired profit margin to arrive at the final client-facing, quote, price.
Okay, so stepping back and looking at the whole process. DUCATO starts by understanding the raw dimensions of the project: runtime, words, actors. Then it consults its detailed rulebooks, those lookup tables, to find the appropriate units, costs, and times per unit for each task and the relevant language and region. It then systematically calculates the total number of those units needed for this specific project for each task. Then it multiplies those units by the cost and time per unit. And finally, it aggregates all those individual task-level costs and times into the final project totals. It really does build the cost and time estimate from the ground up, piece by meticulous piece, based on the actual mechanics of the work involved.
That systematic, multi-layered construction is precisely where the power of this system lies, according to Paolo's vision. It's not a projection based on rough past data or gut feel. It's an estimate built on the fundamental units of work required for that specific job.
And that underlying structure, that systematic buildup, that's what creates the transparency we were talking about earlier, right?
Absolutely. That transparency is arguably as valuable as the final numbers themselves. For sales, think about it. Being able to show a client not just the final price, but a detailed breakdown of why it costs that much, explaining the specific tasks, the units involved, even the logic behind the time estimates. That builds immense confidence and really distinguishes you from competitors who might just offer a single opaque number.
And for operations, receiving that detailed blueprint with precise time requirements per task means they aren't starting from scratch trying to figure things out. They have a clear, data-backed plan ready to execute from day one.
And for FP&A, they gain access to a level of truly transparent, granular data they likely never had before. This enables much more accurate profitability analysis right down to a task or project level. It informs pricing strategies. It supports robust long-term financial planning. It's a whole different level of insight.
So DUCATO isn't just replacing a calculator. It's really aiming to replace that black box with a fully visible, understandable, and predictable process. It's designed to be like your ultimate co-pilot, putting you in command with complete knowledge and precision.
That's the vision Paolo shared with us, yeah. It's about empowering everyone involved in the dubbing project, lifecycle sales, ops, finance, management, with the data and structure needed to navigate the inherent complexity successfully and predictably.
And it's really exciting to know that this isn't just some theoretical concept floating around, but a vision that's actively being developed and brought to life.
The potential impact on efficiency, on profitability, and on client trust in the media localization industry, it feels pretty significant.
Okay, we've taken a truly deep dive today into the world of DUCATO. We started by framing the significant challenge of managing costs and timelines in that complex dubbing labyrinth. We explored Dr. Paolo Fontana's vision for this potentially game-changing tool, detailed the tangible benefits it's designed to deliver for sales, operations, and finance teams. And then we really went under the hood to see how its meticulously engineered system uses project inputs, localized lookup tables, and that step-by-step calculation engine to generate incredibly precise cost and time estimates.
Yeah, we've seen how it aims to break down what can feel like an overwhelming process into understandable, measurable components. And it leverages those critical insights like localized units of measure and driver-based calculations to build estimates really from the ground up.
And the relevance to you, the listener, whether or not you work directly in media localization, is really about how this level of detail and transparency could potentially transform the management of any complex project. It demonstrates that by rigorously deconstructing a process into its core units of work, identifying the drivers for each task, and applying consistent data, you can replace guesswork with predictability. You can save significant time and improve both execution and profitability.
It's about moving away from just intuition or maybe simplified models towards a robust data-driven system, one that's built on the actual mechanics of how the work gets done.
It really makes me think. Building such a detailed, parameter-driven model for a process as intricate and variable as dubbing is incredibly powerful. It takes something that feels complex and opaque and makes it understandable, manageable, and predictable. So what other areas, perhaps within your own work, maybe your team or your industry, could benefit from this kind of rigorous step-by-step deconstruction and modeling? What seemingly complex black box activities could you bring clarity, structure, and predictability to by breaking them down this way?
That's definitely something for you to consider and explore further.